just a friendly reminder, this meeting will be recorded and posted afterwards. So if you ever want to refer back to it or share it with anybody else, it'll be available on the developer blog of about a week after the call's over. And please keep yourself on mute. I will be muting you if you don't, but if you please, if you can help me out with that, that'd be awesome. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into chat at any time. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, and we'll answer as many questions as we can about this or any other Teams developer topics. And with that, let me go ahead and hand it over to Harish. You're up.
So just to cover the agenda once more, I'll be going over like what are the new features in messaging extensions, because that's what I'll be touching upon for a lot of the new integration types that we can sort of enable with these new models, and also touching on some of the ways that you can combine messaging extensions, task modules, and bots to sort of better improve your apps in Teams. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Harish Menon. I've been with the team for about 2 years now, and I own the messaging extensions and bot space for Teams, as well as the cards infrastructure for Teams. This topic, just to set expectations, is primarily focusing on user experience. I will be touching upon like the call flow that enables some of these user experiences, what are the manifest changes involved, and a little bit of the code, but it's not diving too deep into the code aspect of it. If one of these makes sense to you and you want to dive deeper, maybe we can have a follow-up session in one of these calls to sort of go through the call flow and the actual code of what's happening, where, etc. I know Lav touched upon this in his last meeting, but I just wanted to touch upon the new messaging extension features again, because I'll be using a lot of them through the rest of this call. We enabled a bunch of new features in the recent past in messaging extensions, which unlock a lot of new capabilities in Teams. The first is action-based invocations using task modules. This allows you to sort of invoke a modal dialog right from the compose box, no matter where you are in Teams. And that modal dialog can have either an adaptive card or a web view if you want to sort of collect user inputs or to show whatever you want within that modal dialog. Praise is one of our newest messaging extensions that's using this feature right now. And using the same sort of call flow, we've also unlocked something called message actions, which allow you to take an action from any point in a message. So for instance, you can click on a ... of any message, go into more actions, and see a set of third-party actions that you can take with a message. The advantage of this approach is you get the whole message payload as part of creating the action. So you can use that to sort of better enhance your apps, what the app action is going to be. Like, for instance, you can extract who the users are in that message, who's been mentioned, what is the title, what is the subject, and so on and so forth. Similarly, like the latest one that came out, I think almost last week, is bot responses to messaging extension cards. What this allows you to do is basically combine messaging extensions input with a bot as a response. It sounds a bit complicated, but it really isn't. I'll come to exactly what that is in one of the demos later on. And finally, we have smart link previews, which allows you to allows your app to register a domain and then provide previews for that specific domain. Whenever a user pastes a particular link, you will get a notification and can provide a rich preview that then can help the users do more, and so on and so forth. So the primary things that we want to look at in this deck is like how we can combine messaging extensions, task modules, and bots to build a better user experience. Combining these different capabilities simplifies the end user, the way they use the app in Teams, and also minimizes context switching, so they don't have to like switch apps or switch applications too often, and can sort of get their work done quickly within Teams, which is the whole point of the platform integrations with Teams. The deck focuses primarily on bots and messaging extension scenarios, but we can have a similar thing with tabs as well in the future. But for this, for the 1 hour that we have today, I'll be primarily focusing on bots and messaging extensions. To govern the rest of this flow, I've primarily focused on 3 core principles. One is using messaging extensions and task modules, which is our modal dialog interface, to simplify syntax and multi-turn interactions, making sharing easier with link handling, and using message actions to simplify user workflows. To start with, let's look at improving bot interactions. Now, traditionally, in order to capture any input from a bot, you've always relied on having an @mention being done by the user, having a specific syntax for it. Like for instance, in the case of Polly, you would say @Polly and then give a question, and there has to be a question mark. There has to be a set input for one option, give a comma, and a set option for the next one. And so it's very twitchy and syntax based, and users often can tend to make mistakes when they're creating a poll, etc. And this goes in as a public message in the channel or in the chat that you're involved in, and that can be a little bit of an issue because you're having this one dangling message, which essentially means nothing except for calling Polly. So what we've now done is, in order to give this particular input, you can call a task module instead from messaging extension, and that allows you to allows the user to enter the details in a simple form, which you can control what you want it to be within this task module. And then the user can sort of see a preview of what's going to be sent in the channel and chat. And one of the biggest advantages of this approach is that if the bot is not present in the current context in that team or in that chat, we take care of adding it as part of this send flow, so you don't have to worry about it on your app side. Yeah, so the input for this would be just from one of the Compose extensions or messaging extensions at the bottom. If you just click on the polling example that I'm going to show in a couple of minutes, it'll open up a task module which collects the user inputs. And when you send and we've introduced this new response type for messaging extensions called bot message preview, which basically shows this little preview screen that I'm showing here on the right that shows the card that the bot is going to send. If the bot's not part of that team or chat that we're going to send this in, we give a little message to the user that says, hey, clicking will add this particular bot to this channel, and by using it, you agree to its privacy and terms and conditions. What this allows you to do is basically have your bot be sort of omnipresent in Teams, because if the user has personally installed this messaging extension, it travels with them no matter where they're in Teams. It travels with them to any chat or any team context. So they can invoke your bot from anywhere, and Teams sort of takes care of making sure the right set of permissions, etc., are handled as part of using that app. In terms of how you can collect inputs from the user from the task module, there's like a least effort way and like one which is more complicated. The least effort way is to sort of statically define your parameters in the manifest. In that case, what we do on the team side is we build an adaptive card, which is a very basic form. And the advantage of that is you don't have to do much processing on your side. It's the fastest approach because everything's statically defined in the manifest. But the cons are like you'll have to update your app if you want to sort of change the parameters. The layout is kind of fixed as a static form. So if you wanted to sort of change that around, you can't right now. Then there's the most effort, which is a web view based approach. The advantages here, it's like a fully customizable UI, and you can do whatever you want within that sort of module dialog space. And you can change the layout, change the input without having to update the app. The issue is obviously because you're creating a whole web page just to collect the inputs, it's a slightly higher in cost, and the loading time can be slightly higher because we're now essentially iframing a web view within this task module. There's an in-between, which is using an adaptive card. So in this mode, what will happen is when you call a messaging extension, it creates an invoke call back to your bot, and it can return with the JSON control for an adaptive card, and we sort of render that adaptive card within the task module. This is not as flexible as using a web view, obviously, but you still have control over what the layout is going to look like and sort of make it seem like your app for the most part, because adaptive card gives you a lot of control on how the content is rendered, etc. And the other advantages in the adaptive card approach, if the user changes themes and so on, we take care of like applying the right styles, etc. Whereas in the web view approach, you would have to take care of that as part of the app itself. Okay, let's look at a small demo just to show you what I mean. Switching context here. All right. So I'm in this particular team called Market Research and Development. I don't have my particular bot installed in this team, but I want to start a startup poll. But I do have the messaging extension in this case called Cap Polling personally installed for myself. So no matter where I go in Teams, I will find that in my sort of chat box. So when I come to a team where I want to sort of create a poll, all I need to do is click on this particular extension, and it opens up a modal dialog where I can create my poll. So I can say usual lunch one. for that here, but still, let's see. And click submit. And now what's happened in the background is that those inputs have gone to your bot, and the bot has responded with this new response type that we call bot message preview. And we handle this particular screen where we show the user, hey, this is the card that's going to be sent on your behalf in this channel. And since this bot is not part of this team, we also give a little message to the user saying, hey, this will add this particular bot to the team. And by clicking send, you agree to that and so on. So when you click send, in the background, we add this bot to this particular team, and that bot can then send this message into the channel. So as you can see, unlike the earlier form where we had to say at Polly and give a question, answer, and so on, like for these sort of complex input scenarios, in this case, everything's covered from a simple modal dialog, and the user just has to send the finished product to the user. And so you sort of don't have to see what's being done to create the particular poll. You just see the end product, which is what the user cares about in any case. And since it's a bot message that's controlled by the app itself, if I click on vote, for instance, the bot can sort of refresh the card, show the results in the pane, and sort of control what happens with this particular card and so on and so forth. So this is one of the ways that we want to see like messaging extensions and bots being used together to sort of improve the user experience for collecting inputs and so on. Switching back, just to give you a small call flow of what happened. So the first two steps in this are for showing the task module itself. These are optional. The reason I say they're optional is because if you go with the least effort form of giving the inputs as part of the manifest itself, you don't have to specify that these steps won't happen for you because we take care of rendering those inputs. But if you do have the fetch task parameter enabled in your manifest, which means you want to control what your modal dialog looks like, the first call that happens to your bot is a fetch task, which tells you, hey, what do I show in this particular modal dialog? Your bot can respond with a task object, which is this compose extension task response. That task object can be, like I said, either an adaptive card or a web view, like to specify the URL that you want to show in the modal dialog. The other thing it lets you sort of control in the task object itself is what the size of the particular dialog should be. If you specify static parameters, we have a default size, but if you're controlling it with the kind of task, like the kind of adaptive card or URL that you want to show, you can sort of change the size of the task module to sort of fit your content a little better. Once the user enters the inputs, etc., and they click submit, the call goes back to your bot with all the relevant inputs that the user has entered. At that point, your bot it can either handle the call itself, or if you have a service in the backend that's handling all these invocations, you can then do a service call to sort of create the object or complete the task that the user has done. And the response from the user, the response can come back from the service saying this, the item is created or the object is created, and then the bot can sort of formulate a card response and send that as part of this new response type called bot message preview. This is the core piece of this flow here. And once the bot message preview comes, Teams handles a little preview screen that shows you, hey, this is what the bot is going to send. And after that, the bot doesn't really have to worry about when it is going to get added to the team and so on. All you need to listen for is a send submit action. And when the send submit action is coming to you, that means that the bot is present in this context, and all you need to do is actually send that card in this current context. So the last call here is actually to send a bot message in that channel or group chat. In terms of manifest changes that are required, all you need to do is add an action type command into your app. So in the compose extension, in the messaging extensions or compose extension section, we have a new type parameter for actions in developer preview today, as well as a fetch task parameter, which is to sort of control the modal dialog. If you didn't want to use the fetch task, you could instead specify the parameters array and specify the type of parameters you need in an array format, and we'll display that as a form. And that's the other option that you have. And in terms of what happens, so the first call is to sort of fetch task. So whenever you receive a fetch task parameter, so this is showing a small sort of code snippet of what you would have to do is you have to construct the task module response, which specifies the adaptive card as well as or the URL that you want to specify, and send that back. And on click here, getting a submit action. In this case, I've simplified it to two types of submit action. One is to send the actual message. The other one is to actually send the bot message preview. So you can see here, I'm saying return compose extension respond message preview, and that preview contains the card that I want to send in this particular input, and then the user can come back and say send, and then I can send that card in that particular context. Like I mentioned, Teams handles adding the bot in the current context, so it sort of makes the user feel like that particular app is present with them no matter where they go. And for instance, if I've got Polly with me, I can sort of take Polly with me no matter where I go. So that same sort of thing is applicable to you as if for your app that you want to create as well. And just to, I know I overemphasized on the polling aspect of it here, but this also does open up a bunch of other scenarios. Like for instance, you could handle it for tasks, you could handle it for providing kudos. We've been working with partners for that as well. And for any sort of these situations where you want to control the bot card and allow it to refresh, this is a scenario that really helps out to sort of enable that for you. Yeah, so the principle here is combining messaging extensions and task modules to sort of simplify these syntax-based and multi-turn interactions, and basically combine them into a single task module and send it using that. Next, we have simplifying content sharing. So traditionally, content sharing has been primarily done through messaging extension search. So if a user has to, for instance, share a YouTube video in Teams, you would have to click on the YouTube messaging extension, type the search parameter, click on the result, and then share that particular message. One of the things that we found is in most work environments, in most organizations, you're sort of working on a multi-monitor setup anyways. So a lot of users have a browser open and have Teams open on the side as well. And so links are a very common way that they share content in Teams. So in many ways, the user would be sharing a link which is rather meaningless as part of the message, but the receiver, you would have to click on the link in order to find out what it's about. So what we've now done is combining the search-based messaging extensions that we introduced a while ago with links so that you can sort of handle links as part of whenever a user pastes them. So what happens here is you have a message handler for a particular domain in your app. And so whenever the user pastes that link, you get a notification saying, hey, a user has pasted this domain as part of the app, and do you want to provide a response? And you can provide a response. And it allows you to sort of make sharing content easier without the user having to think about, okay, I have to use this app and so on and so forth. As a general principle, we sort of advise saying, hey, make the resulting preview or the full card slightly more useful than what they would normally get by just pasting the link. For instance, if you're just replicating all the details that's present in the link, that's not so useful. But in this case, for instance, in this YouTube one, we see that we get a title, we get the number of views, when it was submitted, and so on and so forth. So it makes the card a little bit more useful in the current context. Just to see that demo, let me switch back to Teams. In this case, I've just pasted this link, and I immediately get this particular response from the app in my compose box itself. It gives me a smaller preview initially. This is done on purpose so that it's in line with what we do for public preview links. Like for instance, if you pasted a Verge link or something in here, this would be the kind of preview you get. But we also, if it's from an app, provide an option to expand the preview. So if you click on expand in this case, it expands to the full card, and then I can send that as part of my message in the team. So this, you could also combine this full card with actions if you wanted to sort of further provide, actions that the user can do on a card. So for instance, if you pasted a Trello link or something like that, Trello could come back and say, this is the card for it, but also have actions on it to add a comment or to edit the description and so on and so forth. So you can either use the information that's present from the link or actions to sort of further enhance your user experience as part of pasting this link. Switch back to show you what's happening in this particular call flow. Maybe I'll move and work up here. Yeah, so in terms of what's happening, there's a new event type in Compose extensions called query link, which is now being sent to the bot. In the manifest, your app would specify the domains that it's interested in a message handlers array, which I'll come to in a sec. So whenever whenever a user pastes a link in the Compose box, you immediately get a Compose extension query link response to your bot. You can use that link to sort of extract the relevant information. For instance, you can extract the ID or some unique identifier from within the link for which you want to display a preview. Then make a call to your service in the backend to fetch the relevant information. The service then responds with the completion of the action. You can use that to construct a relevant adaptive card and then sort of post that response back to the team. And the preview shows up in the Compose box, and the user can send that or expand the card in one shot. The card that's sent back as part of the Compose extension response is the full preview as well, is the small preview as well as the expanded card. So the user doesn't have to do 2 calls in order to sort of see the 2 different versions of the card. So everything happens in one shot. And the other advantage is this is all using the exact same infrastructure that messaging extension search is using today. So if you have a messaging extension already built in Teams, it's using pretty much the exact same call flow, except that the query link aspect of it is slightly different. Everything else is exactly the same as a search messaging extension. Okay. In terms of code changes in dev preview now, you have a new message handlers property that you can add to Compose extensions. This currently supports only the type of link, but we're sort of looking at, hey, can we, in the future, perhaps have different types that we can open this up to, which is why we kept it slightly open right now in terms of not just calling it for links. And in that particular object, you can specify the domains that you want to track. You can track 1 or more domains based on what your app is currently handling. And in terms of what happens when the user pastes the link, you get a new event type called Teams Chat Connect on app-based link query. So this is from our SDK, but you get basically a query link event, and you can just construct a Compose extension response just like you would do for a regular query or a regular search, and send that back to the user. Yeah. So the whole idea here is not to introduce a new way for the user to do something, like for instance, having to go to a Compose extension and search specifically when they already have the content open, to sort of combine something that's more natural to the user, like link sharing, with making it more useful and relevant to the user by providing a richer preview or actions as part of the card to make that content a little bit more relevant when they're sharing it in Teams. Finally, we have minimizing context switching in Teams. So for most common tasks that the user does with your service, we generally say consider adding a command in a messaging extension. Action commands can be initiated from multiple places in Teams. It can be initiated from the Compose box, like you saw in the polling example. You can initiate it from an @ mention, so you can say @poly, create a poll. You can initiate it from a message using this new message actions input that we've added. And the advantage of the message action input is that it provides the message body and details so that you can sort of pre-populate the relevant fields, etc., in your input based on what the user is going to do, based on the message that the user initiated the action on. But this again follows the exact same approach that we do for initiating actions with messages. So what that lets you do is have the same code path. So if you're creating a message action of a Compose box, you can just add a context parameter to sort of create the same thing for a message action and get going from there. So it's like getting 2 birds with 1 stone. Let's look at a demo. I have a small reminders app as a demo here. So if I switch back, let's pick a simple message. So if I go into ... you see a little more actions option available here, and in that I have my set reminder. When I click on set reminder, the exact same flow that I earlier mentioned happens, which is to call the bot to sort of get the get the task module response. This is running in my local machine, so I think it's down right now. If I call it again, it should come. It wouldn't be a demo without a demo fail, I guess. So let's try that once more. There we go. It just had to boot up the service, I guess. So in this case, it's a very basic reminders app that we built just to showcase the functionality. All it's doing is sort of saying, remind me about this particular message in this particular time slot. but it sort of showcases what you can do with message action. So if I say 15 seconds later, in this case, it submits the task module response back to my bot. I'd like to focus on like a couple of things you can do with this at this point. So you can insert text as a response in this reply chain. You can insert a card as a response in the reply chain, or you can even chain multiple task modules together to sort of if you want to do sort of multi-turn interactions in your app. So task modules is one of the most flexible ways you can sort of leverage Teams capabilities today. So it allows you to do a lot with just that one little mode. So I think I've already got the bot message. So let me switch to that. So you can see the bot message in this case is used to showcase message extension. So it gives you the full message payload that I invoked this command off of. So you can see what actually happened in the background. It got a compose extension submit action to the type invoke, and it gives you the command ID that I did it on. And the new thing that is present as part of a message extension, sorry, a message action, is the message payload. This allows you to sort of extract the relevant information that you want from here and then use that as part of your app. So for instance, you could use who it's from. Like for instance, you have the AAD identity of the user. You could use the reactions that that particular message has had. You can extract the mentions if there were any mentions in that particular message. Or just simply like look at the locale information, which channel it was sent on, whether there were any attachments, and actually get the message itself. Let me look. Yeah, so that's the content of the message itself. It says it's HTML, and it has the full information of the message saying just confirm that the prototype outdoor test went perfectly, and so on and so forth. So you can extract and you also get stuff like importance and subject and so on if you want to use that instead as part of your message. So it allows you to do a lot with the core entity in Teams, which is a message. So getting that for an app and doing something with it is really enhancing the capabilities of your app. One of the core scenarios that we're sort of looking at for this is around minimizing context switching. Like, so for instance, you could create a work item or create a bug of a message or set a reminder or do all of these, create a to-do, for instance. So these are the kind of scenarios we're hoping to unlock as part of message actions. And having the whole message content really unlocks that potential with Teams. Looking at what needs to happen in your manifest in order to do this, in dev preview, again, we have a new context property that's present as part of the message extension commands. And you can specify whether you want to be part of the message or compose or command box. This is also new because in the past, if you had a messaging extension command, it had to run in both the power bar or the command box as well as the compose box. We now provide the flexibility for you to say, I want this command to be available only in the compose box. I want this one to be available only in the command box, and so on. So it sort of gives you that flexibility of having different user experience from different points in the app. You can specify the context to be the same in all three. So for instance, you can say compose, you can say command box and message, or you can specify just one or more of them if you need to. Beyond that, the call flow is very similar to what we had in the first one with the polling scenario that I told you. We have a fetch task parameter, which basically goes back, fetches the task module you want to show, and you have the same kind of, the only additional thing here is the command context equal to message, which sort of lets you know which context your command was called on. So in terms of the call flow, like I mentioned, it's very similar to what we did with the polling example. The first two are optional, so you can specify the parameters in the manifest itself. In that case, while you do get the message as part of the invoke, you will get that after the additional parameters that you asked for as part of the manifest on the submit. And your service can basically take an action based on the message, create something in its backlog, create a task or create a work item and so on, and then construct an appropriate response and send that to the user. The biggest advantage of all these flows is you can combine this with a bot flow, for instance, like I showed you in the first scenario that we walked through, to sort of open up a lot of these complex workflows in Teams using just messaging extensions, a task module, and a bot. So the principle here is to sort of use message extensions to simplify user workflows. So these are the three sort of things that we wanted to walk through in this particular demo to sort of showcase these new capabilities that message extensions have and how you can leverage messaging extensions and bots together to sort of create better user flows for anyone in Teams and sort of have a better user experience for you for your app in Teams. With that, I'll open it up for questions. For everything else for anything I talked about today, we have developer preview documentation out already. So for the live card responses or bot responses, we have this first one, then we have initiate action from message and link unfurling or smart link handling. All of them are present in our dev preview documentation today. All right, any questions?
Thanks, Harish. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself if you'd prefer to speak your question, or go ahead and type it in for us, and we'll monitor the chat. We'll hang around for a bit, so if you've got questions, feel free.
Can you go back to that previous slide so I can copy the URLs? Thanks.
Absolutely.
Got it. Thanks.
I'll keep it here in case the others want to copy as well. And the content will be available soon on the dev blog as well.
I have a question for you guys. We always appreciate feedback. If you guys have any particular topics that you'd like us to cover in an upcoming meeting, we'd love to hear. So either shout it out or throw it into the chat. We're trying to make sure we give you guys what you guys want to see. So if you have anything that in particular you want to see, please let us know.
Hi, this is Paula from Avishkaram. So I had a particular topic in mind before I shoot a question. Can we kind of cover like an authentication across all the extension in Teams?
That's a great idea.
We have had an issue in the past that the different extensions require a different kind of authentication, which is causing an issue because user has to go and activate a different extension and sign in again. Although the sign in is a kind of single sign-in experience, but they still have to click on a login to kind of get signed in. So possibly, and the biggest issue is the tab. If you have a tab and extension and bot working together, then it's kind of a really big mess because you cannot sign them in from the tab to the bot. However, you can do from the bot to tab. So possibly we could cover something on that. I would appreciate that.
Definitely, it's one of the places that we get a lot of questions on our Stack Overflow, etc. as well. So
that's good, great. And similarly, I also have a question. I mean, from the authentication perspective, because I see that as you showed on showed the task reminder app.
Mm-hmm.
How does authentication is handled in that case? Is it taking the authentication directly from the messaging extension, or is what kind of extension, and how do we handle the authentication there? Should we click on the authenticate, because maybe eventually in the backend? Sorry to interrupt. I mean, I just wanted to because we would be underneath using the Graph APIs, possibly showing and getting more data about the reminders or whatever we want to create. And that would expire eventually, and we will have to, throw the authentication error, so the user could click login again and then, re-authenticate at some point of time. So how do we kind of, take that into the on that particular app, the task one?
So the short answer is it's using the same authentication as the messaging extension. So if your messaging extension is authenticated, that flow will work. But if, say, the user is using the message action as the first time they're using your app and you need to sign in, we do support the same Compose extension sign-in response in the task module as well. So if you send us back a Compose extension for the submit action, if you send us back a Compose extension sign-in, we'll show that in the task module and make the user log in and then continue the flow. So it's the same flow as Compose extensions, to put it simply, or messaging extensions.
So if they log into Compose extension, they don't have to kind of, complete the authentication again. Okay.
Yes.
That makes sense. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording now. Again, everybody, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your feedback, and as always, let us know if you have anything you'd like to hear from us. In particular, if you don't know, in our docs there is a feedback page. So if you go to docs.microsoft.com and find Teams / Teams Dev, we'll get you to our docs page, but in there's a feedback page. Actually, let me just grab the link.
So just before we get disconnected, I have one quick question. So are we going to be notified in the blog what is the next topic for the event? I mean, this meeting?
Yes, so we sorry about that. Yeah, moving forward, we really do want to try to give the topic for the next one and give that out in this meeting. But so we're pretty sure we're going to do a build recap and do like a deeper dive into the stuff that we're announcing at build. But that's kind of up in the air, so we might not do that yet. So we didn't want to like hard announce it and tell everybody that's what we're doing, because we might not. So probably a deeper dive into the stuff from build, but I'm not 100% sure on that yet. Hopefully by the time the blog post comes out, we will know for sure what we're going to do next month.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think that would also help the deep dive from the build.
Okay, thank you all very much for joining us. I think that's all that we have for today.
Thanks, folks.